Lost in His Own Museum, episode 6 with Twig and Jim. I'm Twig.
And I'm Jim.
And this time around, we watched Christopher Nolan's 2006 movie, The Prestige, which he made in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Yeah, he did indeed, and it's so good.
It is amazing. I love this movie. Do you love this movie?
I do love this movie so much. It's my favourite Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, I think it's probably mine as well, because I think it's the most Nolan-y Nolan movie. Do you know what I mean? It's like... It's his most sort of like all the stuff that Nolan does is he does best in this film. I find.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I'll come to this probably a bit later on as we delve into it. I think what works so well for this is the fact that because it's based on some source material, he's not allowed to stray too far off the beaten track. Like, he's got creative control and he's got the reins, and obviously the screenplay is written by him and his brother, and obviously, like I say, it's based on that novel, The Prestige, by Christopher Priest. But because they've got a formula and a framework that they have to stick to, it really seems to make him work for it. Yeah, the non-linear stuff's brilliant. I mean, that's right out of the novel, which is probably one of the reasons it appealed to him. But like when you take some of his later stuff, like Tenet, Dunkirk, and even Interstellar, whilst they are technically brilliant films, you can tell he's just been given carte blanche to do whatever. And like sometimes it pays off, i.e. Inception or The Dark Knight. But then other times, like maybe Tenet and possibly to a lesser extent Dunkirk, doesn't. So I think it's quite good that he's got... I mean, look, The Dark Knight's easily rated. I mean, it's not my favourite of his films, like I say this is, but The Dark Knight is probably the public's consensus of his best film. And I think he works best when he's got guidelines to stay with him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is... I did a little poll, which we'll get into later on when we're going to be talking about a few Christopher Nolan's movies. And this is kind of ranked the best of the like non-Batman Christopher Nolan movies, which I think is fair.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, should we do a little plot recap?
Yeah, absolutely. You taking this one?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So it's the 1890s in London. Robert Angier, who's played by Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, who's played by Christine Bale twice. Yeah, we can do spoilers because
spoilers.
If you haven't seen this movie, it's so difficult to talk about a Christopher Nolan movie without spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie, come no further. Go and have a listen to it. Go and have a watch of it,
and then come back to us
before you have a listen to this. Yeah, because it is damn near impossible to do anything to do with a Christopher Nolan movie and getting this sort of any sort of depth and detail with it without going spoilers. Because there's there's at least 3 major reveal plot twists in this movie.
There is, but the whole thing's spoiler territory, and it's one of those films, isn't it?
Which is what happens when you do a non-linear movie, isn't it? Like,
well, it is, yeah. But the whole thing is just, it's like everything's a spoiler and nothing's a spoiler at the same time.
Yeah, because it's not technically the end of the story. It's like, yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. Anyway, we're in the 1890s. It's London in the 1890s. So yeah, Robert Angier, played by Hugh Jackman.
Cast your minds back.
Alfred Borden, played by Christine Bale, are working as shills for a musician. I knew I was going to do that.
We were just talking, just having the preamble before recording, and I said, let's keep the plot recap quick and let's dive into theories and what we love about the movie, because that in turn will tell the story of this film. And I said musicians twice, and Phil corrected me.
Yeah, I knew I was going to do it. They're working under the mentorship of John Cutter, who's played by Michael Caine, who's an engineer who designs like equipment needed for magicians.
Just, yeah, for stage magic. He's basically an effects sort of artist, isn't he? Like practical effect artist.
Yeah, more or less. So Angier and Borden are arguing over this this water tank trick, and it's Angier's wife is going to be in the tank, and Borden wants to tie a certain type of knot that he reckons is going to look better to the crowd and it's going to hold tighter. She reckons that she can slip it, and so they go for this kind because Angier and Borden are quite good friends at this point. They've been working together for a while. They go to the water tank trick one night, and she gets stuck in the tank and drowns. Angier blames Borden for it, claiming that he's tied this different knot, and she hasn't been able to slip it. And it sort of starts them off on a rivalry. They start their own careers in magic.
And they sort of go off from there, really, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, they start sabotaging each other, and it just gets a bit out of hand and gets a bit silly. And so Borden's had this diary that he's been keeping the entire time, which Angier steals, and it turns out that it's all encoded using a rotating substitution cipher. So he's trying to find out what the keyword is. He kidnaps Borden's sort of engineer assistant guy, buries him alive.
And sort of bribes him, doesn't he, to get the keyword out of him? And sort of
blackmails, I would say, rather than bribes.
Blackmails, bribes. It's all good. But it's like you say, because this film is completely non-linear, and we're at that point, we're at this point, and we jump backwards and forwards, and
there's a lot of jump cuts.
Yeah, after the wife's died and they've become bitter enemies. They like you say, they both go off on their own magic careers, and Borden's playing the bars and the clubs and the pubs and just the absolute dives of Victorian London. And Angier's sort of gone back to Cutter, and they've refined a stage act, and they're doing the theatres and the town halls, and it's like a visual representation of something that John Cutter's character says earlier in the film about needing to get your hands dirty in a trick. And sort of like Christian Bale's playing these dives, and they're the clientele are absolutely just the sort of the dregs of 1890s society that are watching him, and they're there to watch him basically get shot because he's got a trick with catching a bullet. And then Angier, who's taken on the mantle of the great Danton, and he's doing all this sort of like in spotlights, and it's all sleight of hand stuff and bringing pigeons out of his sleeve and all, exactly what you'd expect to see of a turn of the century magician. And sort of, like you said, that sabotage bit sort of goes from there, because Angier then turns up to one of the pub performances and puts a real bullet in the gun that's supposed to be carrying blanks, and ends up shooting Borden in the hand, so he ends up losing a couple of fingers. And sort of like then Borden then gets his own back, doesn't he? Like you say, they're sabotaging each other's act. He goes to the theatre then and sabotages one of the bird tricks, where he ends up sort of crushing a lady's hand. They call a volunteer out of the audience, and then Borden comes up as well, and they ruin the trick, so that they end up sort of damaging the whole thing, and this poor lady's hands end up getting crushed as a sort of an outcome of that sort of thing. So it sort of puts them basically sort of at odds with each other again, and just only fuels this bitter rivalry that they've got.
Yeah, so Borden's got this. Borden's figured out how to do this transported man trick, which is like the thing that he's wanted to use for ages, and it's finally sort of the big finale of his show.
And it's the central plot point, really, isn't it? Is the transported man? Yeah,
because Angier can't figure out how he's done it, because he's absolutely determined that he hasn't used a body double. And Michael Caine's character's got this. Yeah, they've got this whole thing about like he's used a double. It's the only way, and he's obviously looking for something a lot more complicated than what's really going on. And he goes and finds Nikola Tesla, because Borden's been messing with him and convinced him that Tesla's built him this machine that can transport someone from one place to the other. Sent him off on a wild goose chase, which purely coincidentally, Nikola Tesla has actually figured out how to do this. This is Tesla, played by David Bowie, who is brilliant in this. He's just amazing.
I know I've mentioned before as well, but the fact that Nolan flew out to him personally to ask him to do it after Bowie's agents and representatives had turned it down, and the fact that Nolan went out and saw him in person, he was like, "Come on, you are the guy for this role."
Bowie's agents and representatives don't know what they're talking about, because the thing is, like, I don't think that you'll find anybody weird enough for the sort of stuff that David Bowie would actually have done, and I think meeting him in person was the right call, because Bowie's the sort of bloke that I think if once someone's explained the plot of this movie to him and the character that he's going to be playing, he's not going to be able to resist it.
No.
And I think that's a mistake on the part of his agents and stuff, is to turn down someone like Christopher Nolan for I mean, you wouldn't turn him down for it now, would you? You know what I mean? Like 14 years later.
No, but at the time he was still up and coming a little bit, really, when you sort of think about it, because I mean, he'd done Memento, Insomnia, and Batman. But the first Batman, whilst it was a success, it wasn't the runaway success that The Dark Knight was. So the Dark Knight was his turning point, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Memento and Insomnia were almost sort of cult status.
Yeah, exactly. But they were exactly that. They were cult. They weren't mainstream. They've become mainstream because of Batman, basically.
They were sort of curios for people that were interested in filmmaking, because it was so weird and so interesting in that sort of non-linear storytelling and like and certain types of cinematography. And it was like they were films for movie nerds, I think.
Yeah, films for film lovers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And to be honest, at this point in Christopher Nolan's career, I don't think The Prestige was much different from that. I mean, I remember that the first time I saw Memento I think that was around the time that The Prestige would have been coming out, and it just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away.
Well, when I first saw Memento, it was with you. And it was when you were crashing around at my old gaff when we had a gig. We had to set off early to get to a gig the next day. So you came and crashed over, and I remember watching it. And I wasn't overly impressed with it, to be fair. And it's still not one I would put anywhere near the top of my Nolan list. But that's probably a debate for another day, is that? Because I could go down a right old rabbit hole with Memento.
Yeah. I think the thing is, because Christopher Nolan's kind of popularised this style of filmmaking.
Yeah, this, like I say, non-linear, sort of back to front, sort of all over the shop.
But at the time, it just wasn't really done. Like it wasn't a popular idea, and I think it was much more. I think if you'd seen Memento like 5 or 6 years earlier than you did, I think you'd have been a lot more impressed with it, because it was like it kind of Memento sort of opened a floodgate a little bit for filmmakers to start doing this more sort of strange non-linear stuff more in kind of the mainstream. I think Memento was responsible for a lot of sort of popularising that idea. But yeah, anyway, sorry, we've gone off on a bit of a tangent there.
So we did, yeah. So
he goes to see Nikola Tesla, and Tesla's built this machine that he reckons can transport something from one place to another.
Yeah, he's away though, isn't he? For a long time. Tesla takes 2 years building this machine, and all the while Angier stays in the hotel down the road, doesn't he?
And yeah, because Tesla's sort of on the run from Edison, really, isn't he? He just kind of wants to be somewhere to do some weird experimenting things and sort of get away from everyone.
Yeah, they've got their whole sort of thing going on, haven't they? I really like how this film, a complete work of fiction, obviously, but brings in real life people from the era. It just sort of gives it a real flavour of, do you know what I mean? It's sort of like just makes it feel a bit more real. The fact that you've got Edison and you've got Nikola Tesla, and even I'll come to it in a short while. But the Chinese magician that they go to see in one of the opening acts of the film is a real person.
Yeah, I looked that up. Yeah,
or at least the character's based on a real person that did a similar thing. But yeah, Angier's in Colorado Springs, and he's there for 2 years whilst Tesla builds this machine for him. And at first he's unimpressed, isn't he? Because like they go into they put a hat in the machine, and then they put a cat in a hat in the machine,
and it doesn't appear to be doing anything. But it turns out that it's duplicating everything, and they ended up somewhere else. So yeah, he gives him this. Tesla sort of gets chased out of this little Colorado town by Edison's people, and he leaves the machine for Angier
at the hotel.
And so Angier uses it, and he figures out, like with the instructions that he's been left, and he figures out that he can duplicate himself. And instead of doing the sensible thing and duplicating himself once and being okay with there being two of him, which
it never really occurs to anybody, does it? Because we kind of glossed over this because of the way the film darts backwards and forwards. But when Cutter, Michael Caine's character, suggests that the only way Borden can be doing the original transported man trick is with a twin, with a double, and, you know, sleight of hand and all that sort of stuff, Angier won't hear it, but seeing no alternative, they go and hire a guy who has a look of him, don't they? And they dress him up to... Obviously, it is just Hugh Jackman doubled in the film, but the idea is that it's somebody dressed up to look like him, to come out and be the prestige at the end of the act, sort of thing. But he's not satisfied. I love that character. Yeah. Root. He's just an absolute pisshead.
Yeah, he goes off on that one with the oh, you seem surprised. I've been Julius Caesar. I've played Faust. Like, how difficult could it be to play the great Danton? Like, it's class. But because he's a wrecker.
But yeah, absolutely. But really clever again with the writing there, because obviously Caesar and Faust are, you know, both characters that, you know, sort of rise to great heights and then tragically fall.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that, but yeah, I suppose so. That's a nice little... There's a lot of stuff like that in here.
Yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing, like the scene where Borden at the start of the film is doing the trick with the canaries and the little boy cries, and he's like, "But where's his brother?"
Oh yeah, you've killed him.
And he's like, "Clever little boy you've got there." But again, it's foreshadowing because, again, massive spoiler here, folks. But obviously, Robert Angier has found a way to do it with real magic through science, but Borden's trick is much simpler. It's the whole Occam's razor thing, isn't it? The simplest solution being the most likely one. He is just a twin, but the two twins have decided to live one combined life, which is why throughout the film, when you see the character at different sort of moods, and there's so many hints to it, like when his wife says, "Okay, you love me today, but you didn't yesterday," or whatever it is she says.
That's one of those things I didn't understand at all when I first watched it, and then, you know, when you watch it again, you realise that she's probably got a vague idea at least of what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bit where before she unfortunately takes her own life, and she's screaming at him, "I know what you are," she's figured it out. Yeah,
because the whole thing about the when she's looking at the stumps on his fingers, so the bleeding again, like it seems like it's as if it just happened yesterday, and that's because it did, like, because the brother is gone and done it again.
Exactly, yeah.
And cut off his own fingers. And there's a lot of... It's a very meta film. Like, there's a lot of sort of references to... There's a lot of references to itself, I find, because, you know, this movie is a magic trick, is the point. The act structure is the same, you know, and it's when Michael Caine's character is talking at the beginning about the 3-act structure, about
and he's like, you've got
present something normal, and
and the pledge, and then the turn. Is it the pledge, the turn, and then the prestige?
And then the prestige,
yeah, and it is exactly that, isn't it? Yeah.
The thing is with this, Angier is cheating, right? Like, because what he's doing is he's gone to huge lengths to make this happen and to make this trick as good as it can be, but, you know, he's using science, which to me, science against this sort of the act of actual illusionism, you know, about sleight of hand and distraction and that sort of stuff. What Angie is doing is cheating, and it just doesn't occur to him that it's as simple as Borden's doing it.
No, and it's because they keep saying the whole obsession. You're obsessed. Obsession's a young man's game, and it is that sort of. Like I say, it is the simplest explanation that is, but he's looking for something more.
Yeah, isn't he? No, exactly. He's looking for something really complicated, and it's just not there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's. I can't think of something to liken it to either in real life or in film, but there will be. You know, put yourself in a scenario where you've built something up for however long, maybe your entire life, and then when you actually get it, it doesn't live up to the height because you've built it up more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes to this. There's a lot of, like, in that, particularly in the sort of final plot twist where you find out that because I didn't realise this for ages. When I first watched it, what I thought was happening was because because Borden says the thing about Tesla, like, it never occurred to me that he was lying about it just to mess with him. What I thought he'd done was gone to Tesla and ended up with
a clone.
With a clone, and just one. And just being happy with one, rather than him being an identical twin. Whereas Angier's like, it doesn't even occur to him. Like, the only thing he can think to do is just kill them over and over and over again. And commit murder/suicide, 100 times. Because he does 100 shows. And it's just, like, the themes, the sort of themes of it I'll really like, because it's the thing about, first of all, obviously Occam's razor. Simplest explanation is obviously the right one. Like, don't overcomplicate it, because it starts getting messy, and the whole thing about getting his hands dirty, and turns out you don't need to, in terms of murdering people. You've just got to make the sacrifice.
It does, absolutely. And like you say, if he goes through the machine once, he can do the act, because he can still be hidden up in the balcony and appear up there, and the guy can go down the trapdoor. Yeah.
Because I like the thing of him trying to do it all like really big and grandiose, and there's the conversation that he has with Cutter, when he says, the problem is it was too quick. The audience didn't have time to see it. Like, it was too fast, and they don't care how it's done because they didn't really notice what was going on, And Angier's got this thing, he's a terrible magician, and Cutter's, no, he's a wonderful magician. He's a terrible showman. He doesn't know how to dress it up, and that's the whole thing. The entire time, Borden is the better magician here.
Yeah, no, he really is, isn't he? And like you say, it's. But I think I always take away from it that if Angier's character had just put the energy into his art, he would have been the better.
Yeah, whereas he didn't. He put the energy into his obsession and his revenge, and by which time he doesn't even care about his wife.
No, it's
he's forgotten all about his wife.
He's become that consumed with the act and the trick and the show that it's like, when Scarlett Johansson's character, who's sort of she plays Angier's assistant, and then she's sent as a spy and a mole to go and work for Borden, but ends up falling for him, and sort of there's this whole sort of like whose side she really on sort of thing. But then it turns out she is really going to work with Borden, and it's like you say, when she makes the comment about what would your wife think? I don't care about my wife, but actually, no, this whole thing started because your wife died supposedly, at least in your mind, at the hands of this man.
Because they're both obsessing though. Because like when Angier gets the machine to work, like, but it's taken Borden ages to figure out how he did it as well.
Yeah,
and he's starting to obsess over it, and like, nah, you need to outthink him. Like.
Yeah, exactly. But that brings us to the main twist of the film, the big reveal at the end. So Borden is twins, as we've mentioned, and in the novel, it's Albert and Frederick that decide to combine as one life of Alfred. It's not really explicitly said in the film, but in the novel, that's the explanation of it. So it's Freddy. It's the one that generally is seen as Fallon. That is the one that becomes obsessed with bettering Angier. The one that's Alfred, that's married to Sarah and has the little girl and has become the family man, is kind of at peace with just doing his show.
Yeah.
Isn't it? But he's the one ultimately that ends up on death row.
Yeah, because this is the thing as well. I remember seeing it before and thinking, why does he care, and then he doesn't, and then he does, and then he doesn't.
Yeah.
Like he keeps flipping backwards and forwards, and for some reason it never occurred to me. I mean, it's so obvious now. Like it was so obvious after I knew what the plot twist was.
But it's one of those films like Fight Club where when you watch it for the first time, it doesn't jump out at you, and then when you get the reveal, you're like, oh. And then when you watch it again, it's just blatantly, obviously in your face.
Which is, again, successful magic trick.
Yeah.
Like, once you realise how it's done, it's like, you feel so stupid because it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Of course, that's, and I think that's great. I think Christopher Nolan is I think he nails that perfectly. Of like, this movie's a magic trick.
Yeah.
You know, because there's lots of grandiose stuff happening, there's lots of distraction going on, and then it's simple. It's just simple, and you've built up this idea in your head of it being really complicated, and
but it's not. It's like you say, it's the simplest solution. So the end of the film really, I would summarize it as when Angier gets back from America with the cloning machine. He re-engages Cutter Services. They book the biggest theatre in town, and they do a limited 100-night engagement, 100 shows, and then he's retiring. And it really is just bait, isn't it, to lure Borden in, and then to Borden, sort of, as we later learn, the two brothers have been having the dialogue. One of them's like, just let it be. We don't need to. But then one of the brothers, he can't help but go and find out what's going on, which is exactly what Angier wants, because then obviously when Angier falls through the trapdoor into the water tank to drown, it's then sort of the other one realising what's happened. The Angier that's supposed to appear at the back of the theatre disappears into the night, and then everyone just believes that obviously Borden's put the trick there and put the trap there and let him drown, so he ends up getting hanged for it. And then obviously Angier then reveals himself as Lord Cordlow, which is something that comes a bit out of left field in the movie, but in the novel, it's better explained.
Yeah, I think that's something that could have been explained better in the movie if they'd introduced the character a bit sooner. One thing, do you know one bit of trivia I didn't notice for ages because I've been trying to figure out who it is. The guy who's like the envoy for Lord Cordlow, the guy that keeps appearing at the. I don't think you ever find out what his name is.
Oh, like the solicitor guy.
Yeah, do you know who the actor is?
No, go on.
That's the guy that played the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Oh my God, so it is.
Yeah, it took me ages to figure out who it was. I was like, I'm determined not to look it up because it seems so obvious. And I finally figured it out last night.
That's wonderful. Of course it is.
Yeah.
I can see it in his face now. That's brilliant.
That's just awesome.
Oh, that's such a good film. Is it Blinking, The Blind Lookout?
Yeah, I think it's my favourite Mel Brooks movie. Like,
yeah, I think it could be mine.
Yeah.
I did like History of the World as well, but yeah, and
that's a good one.
Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles is really funny. Yeah, but there's something about that. I am a Chew, father of a sneeze. Like, bless you.
Oh, wonderful. But yeah, at the end of the film, Borden's sentenced to hang, and the Sheriff of Rottingham turns up and gives him basically the opportunity to let his daughter go and live with Lord Codlow, who will basically look after her. She'll want for nothing, as they say in the film. It's either that or she ends up in the workhouse. And so he signs over the pledge and the turn for each of his acts, but says until he can meet Lord Cordlow that he won't give the prestige over. And then at the end of the film, Lord Cordlow comes to visit him on the day of his hanging, and it's revealed to be Angier, and this is how he's retired, and so he's going to be looking after it. And so obviously Borden has a meltdown in jail, and he's like trying to get the warden. Look, that's the guy I'm supposed to have killed, and obviously it does no good, and he ends up getting hanged.
Which is fair,
separately
though.
to that.
That's the thing. Why don't they take any notice? Because that's like the guy's quite famous.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they should recognise him. People should recognise him. There's got to be photos of him and stuff like that in the newspapers, and you'd think at the very least they'd take a little bit of notice. you know?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is even if Fallon came forward and Borden came forward and went, look, that's the guy he's supposed to have killed, and he's like, no, these guys are just trying to get themselves off the murder charge. Michael Caine, you just bring Michael Caine in. And it's like, nah, actually, lads, don't know what's going on here. There's obviously been something, but that is him. And, yeah, absolutely.
That's almost daft enough to be a plot hole.
It is a little bit, yeah. But, I mean, it's picking holes in a brilliant movie. And Michael Caine's character, John Cutter, who's completely disillusioned, again, pun intended, by the whole film's events, is now the executor of Angier's estate, and Lord Cordlow decides that he wants to buy everything that belonged to Angier, all his music gear, and Cutter tries
His
to
magic gear.
sort of, yeah. What did I
did
say?
it again.
Music gear.
Yeah.
Oh goodness me! Sorry, folks. We're musicians. What can I say? I'm sat here. I'm recording this in my studio. Phil's in his, and
Standard
I've got the
Freudian
camera in
slip.
front of me. But yeah, I've got a bass, 2 acoustics, an SG, a Strat in front of me. It's like, but it's bound to happen.
It's just a harmless
yeah,
Freudian slip. It's all good.
Absolutely. So Cutter is pleading with the Sheriff of Rottingham not to buy the transported man trick and to let him destroy it, because he just doesn't want the equipment ending up in the wrong hands. But unfortunately, he won't have any of it, and so Cutter decides that he's going to deliver it personally to try and appeal to Lord Cordlow's good nature. And it's there, when he gets there, that he realises that Lord Cordlow is actually Hugh Jackman's character, Angier, and he is the clone that got away. And basically, sort of, he realises that he's been played.
Is that what we'll call in the episode, the clone that got away?
Can be.
The Prestige and the clone that got away.
But yeah, at that point, Cutter goes to Fallon, who he knows is obviously been looking after the little girl in the meantime, and lets him know what's going on, and then they're able to settle the scores. Fallon reveals that he is actually the twin brother of Borden and shoots the clone Angier, and then goes and gets his little girl back, and they sort of go on and live happily ever after. And I suppose that's really around the houses sort of a run through of this film. And because, like we say, it's all over the shop in terms of it's not a linear story, or it's not told as a linear story. That's probably the best way to sum it up. I adore this film, Phil. I absolutely love it.
I do. Do you know what? It's a top performance from all the cast members. The cinematography is beautiful. It's beautifully edited. It's a very well made film. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less from Christopher Nolan in general, but this is, because this was quite relatively early in his career, as the sort of filmmaker that we know Christopher Nolan is now. After these massive things like Interstellar and Inception and Tenet and Dunkirk and the Dark Knight Trilogy, this was still fairly early in his in his career to become that filmmaker.
Yeah.
And you've got performances in there by obviously David Bowie, Scarlett Johansson, Rebecca Hall, Michael Caine, Hugh Jackman, Christine Bale. You've got Andy Serkis in there as well.
I think if they couldn't have got Bowie, he would have been a good second choice for Tesla.
Yeah, I think so. That was maybe the idea.
You never know. We'll never know, but brilliant. But like you say, really, really brilliant cast. Everybody's well acted. Nobody hams it up or chews the scenery, and the stakes feel real. And when you're watching it, do you know one thing I obviously love about this film is, like I say, is just how visual it is, and like I say, how many cues and clues along the lines there are to reveal what's really going on, and it sort of like does the whole Fight Club thing about once you've seen it, they're so in your face, it's unreal. But until you know what's going on, it's just completely over your head, sort of a thing.
Yeah, you don't really notice the clues till the second time, or like the first time they're just confusing bits of throwaway dialogue and like.
I loved what John Nolan and Chris Nolan did with the screenplay for this, because they took the core of the story and I think they might have improved upon the book. So the difference between this and the book is that it's set between the present day and the 1890s. And in the present day, we meet up with the great-great-granddaughter of Angier, and we meet up with the great-great-grandson of Borden. And they're trying to find out about this historical feud between the two families. and they both have, respectively, their great-great-granddad's diaries. So the two diaries that Nolan, because obviously Nolan obviously writes into it, doesn't he, that one of the diaries gets stolen, but then the other one gets given one to read in prison, and that's how we get the two sort of narratives, as it were. But in this one, these two kids, these two, I don't know how old they'll be, but these two great grandkids have got the two diaries and are basically sort of reading through both diaries and realizing that the truth's probably somewhere in the middle, and it's that sort of a thing. And then the book sort of plays out largely the same, but instead of his wife dying, it actually turns out that the reason they get into an argument is and a bitter rivalry is because Angier is a fraud, and he's running a séance.
Okay.
That Borden reveals to be a sham. And Borden only reveals it to be a sham after he's been to one of these séances to be in touch with a previous, a departed loved one, and then realised after the fact that it's a scam. So he then goes to expose him. So the wife never dies, and basically Borden sort of ruins his career. So that's where that starts from. And then the whole transported man bit and the Nikola Tesla intervention does it. But the Tesla machine doesn't clone them. What it does is it takes the essence from a person and puts it into a new body, and then leaves a dead, lifeless shell behind. So there's no need to ever actually kill the person that goes down the trapdoor. And so that's something that Nolan's written into it. And the bit that Borden actually interferes with ends up stopping the machine from working halfway through. So there's a half Angier up there and a half Angier down here. Both are shells, sort of thing. And then it sort of goes on from there. And then the whole Lord Codlow thing is brought into it again. And one of the shell Angiers, we never find out what happens to the other one. Or initially in the story we don't. And then the other one ends up becoming terminally ill because they're essentially half a man. And dying. And then sort of cut back forward to the present day. And the two great grandkids go to the old Angier family estate and find that the other half shell of Angier is still alive in 1995, just wasting away, which sounds really creepy.
Yeah, it does a bit. I mean, yeah, I think that would have been hard to do in a film without.
I'm glad they didn't do that for the film, but doesn't that sound like I don't know, just I can't think how you could work it in, but the whole 100 years later, he's a withered shell, still alive in a, nearly 200 years old or whatever he'd be.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a
50, I suppose.
It sounds like there's a bit of kind of Dorian Gray type influence in there.
Yeah, I mean, I've only looked up the synopsis, but I'm intrigued to read it.
Yeah, I might have a go at it.
Which is I think the sign of something that's good. But it sounds like a completely different story. Sort of like, and I think Nolan's taken the elements of it that really, really work and turned it into this fantastic film about these two blokes having this rivalry. And I think one thing that worked really well in the film as well is that there's no clear protagonist or antagonist, is there? There's no goodie or baddie.
No, I mean, not at least not until the end, because this is the thing. Like, this is sort of another part of the whole magic trick bit of it is, like by the end of it, it's not as it seems. It's not as you think it is, because you sort of root for Angier all the way through the story, because the whole thing about his wife getting killed, and then as it steadily moves along, you start to realise that Borden's not really doing anything wrong, and this rivalry's just got a little bit out of hand, and Angier's a monster by the end of it. He's been all over the world. He's spent so much money just to kill someone every night for 100 nights and put them in a glass box. And
yeah, and it's like I said before, and I can't remember whether this was in the sort of like the pre-show where we were just having a natter, or whether I said this in it, but it goes back to the line that Cutter says about needing to get your hands dirty to be a good magician. And Borden really embraces that. And again, it's visually told through the venues they're playing. Borden's in the bars and the dives, and then obviously Angier's on the theatre stages and putting on a real performance, and doing all that sort of thing. But by the end of the film, they've almost kind of reversed roles. Borden's become this sort of family man, and he's got the whole sort of duality sort of thing going on, because obviously him and his twin brother are living the same life, and one of them is still obsessed with the show and wants to better Angier and wants to destroy him, but actually he's just all about raising his daughter. And then, like you say, Angier's just descended into this madness, and he's become all consumed by it.
Yeah, by this sort of complete obsession, and it's I think by the end of it, you're really starting to see a more clear sort of good and bad thing going on. Because obviously, I think it's more of a sympathy thing, because you have a lot of sympathy for Borden, because he's lost his brother, and his brother's been framed for a murder that he didn't commit. So I think there's a lot of redemption stuff going on, and there's by the end of it, there's a much clearer idea of good and bad. But it is a blurry one. It's what's your favorite bit? What, like, if you were to pick like a favorite bit of the film?
Oh, do you know, that's really, really, really hard to say. I just absolutely love the first time Chris Bale does the transported man in the dirty little bar, and Angier's sat there in the audience, and he's just like, the complete look of bewilderment.
Yeah, it's the music just builds up as well, and then it stops.
Yeah,
when he walks through when he throws the ball and walks through the door, it stops.
Yeah, and
the tension just breaks. It's beautifully done, that, because there's quite a bit of build up to that scene. And he's sitting on his own, staring into space, and ScarJo asks him, what if you hurt him at the show, and
what was it bad? No, it was the best thing I've ever seen, or whatever it is he said. It's something like that, isn't it? Yeah, and he's in complete awe of his enemy.
Yeah, there's the tense build up that suddenly breaks, which is something that Christopher Nolan does really well. It reminded me
in The Dark Knight, doesn't it?
Yeah, it reminded me of that scene in The Dark Knight where there's the rapid scene changes, and the building music, and then stop, and the Joker walks through.
Good
evening,
the elevator. Ladies and gentlemen.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. That makes the hairs stand up on my arms. Like, it's stunning.
Yeah.
But that's what that reminded me of, and that's something that Christopher Nolan does beautifully, I think.
Yeah. It was, I think that's going to be one of my favourite scenes. I mean, I watched this on 4K last night. My sister bought me the 4K Blu-ray for Christmas, just gone, and it obviously looks absolutely spectacular, and you can really appreciate the cinematography and the shots, and just how well Christopher Nolan
gorgeous.
Makes his films. Yeah. Absolutely spectacular stuff. Well, Phil, would you believe we've netted on for 3/4 of an hour about this film?
About the plot of The Prestige. It's such a good film. Is it going in the museum?
Oh, of course it's going in the museum.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's getting its own wing.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan's entire filmography, I think, is one for the museum.
It's one of them for me. Nolan's filmography would go in because of who it is. If we were looking at some of the individual films, there'd be a couple of films I would let loose to history. I would happily. I'd be honest, I'm not sure I'd put Insomnia in.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that film. I think he was still kind of finding his feet with making, like, a normal movie after Memento.
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't put Tenet in.
Watch it again. I've seen it twice, and it's good the second time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, watch it again.
Well, there we go. Maybe that can be another episode. But in regards to The Prestige, I would say
you have chosen wisely.
Yep. So
there we have it. So that's us talking about The Prestige.
Yeah. Should we see what how did it do on IMDb? That's an 8.5.
It's an 8.5 on IMDb. Yeah, IMDb doesn't work in percentage. I think it's a 76 on Rotten Tomatoes. I know I looked at it because I know that until... Oh, what film was it now? Was it Interstellar? Until Interstellar came out, or Dunkirk, one of the two, it was Nolan's lowest rated film, which I find bizarre.
Yeah, it is strange.
Absolutely, just bizarre. I love this film. I do love Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker, though. I think he's definitely got a style that is very much like Mr. Fincher that we talk about, or Denis Villeneuve, or even Scorsese, or Cameron, or Tarantino, or Hitchcock. Loads of it. He's got a style, and you recognise it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, particularly in terms of like narrative storytelling.
Yeah, and you just know when you're watching a Christopher Nolan film, and I just think he is a really good filmmaker. I hope whatever he does next, he reins it in a bit, and maybe goes a bit more back to basics. Maybe even adapts something again, because I know Tenet was a passion project for him, and I will give it another watch. I'm not, but. It's rare that, like, I came out of the cinema and, if anybody follows my YouTube, me and Phil did a little vlog, and I gave it a 7 out of 10 at the time, and I think you can probably tell in the video, I'm just stunned by what I've watched. And then as I've had time to sit and digest it and think about it, it's one of them films where I just actually think there was more in it I didn't enjoy, or that I took umbrage with, than perhaps I did. But I will at some point sit down and give it another watch. Again, I can't remember who, but somebody bought me the 4K for Christmas. I asked for it, so I've got it to watch, and obviously have the cheeky little cinema room downstairs. So that'll be as good a experience as any to watch it. And yeah, I suppose I'll let you know in a future episode what I think. But this guy is one of my favourite filmmakers. My introduction to him was Batman Begins, because I am a Batman nut, an absolute Batman nut. But, shortly after that, I found this film, The Prestige, that we've talked about. And then obviously Dark Knight came out. Inception was an absolute runaway hit, wasn't it? And then at that point was when we started to maybe go back, and you showed me Memento. And whilst I didn't love it, I enjoyed it enough to want to seek out Insomnia and sort of see what bridged the gap between Memento and Batman, and then obviously I loved Interstellar when that came out. Don't get me wrong, the third act has so many problems, but I did love it because I love the whole sort of like Contact-esque time travel, spacey sort of pulls at the old heartstrings type of movie. That's I am the demographic for that. But
yeah, it was very Contact, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 100%, 100% very sort of like Carl Sagan sort of taken right out of something like that. Yeah, just great stuff. And then when we did our Nolan marathon up to the release of Dunkirk 4 years ago now, which is crazy, obviously sought out Following, and Following blew me away.
Yeah, Following's brilliant, because I think is like a very first attempt.
There's one that like his college film or something, like his university project.
Yeah. I mean, he'd done a short film called Doodlebug, which is very weird. It was the thing about the guy being the tiny version of a guy being chased around his living room by the full size version. Yeah, that was quite strange.
Very, very bizarre, but certainly showed the talents of things to come. And I mean, with Following as well, obviously it is fairly linear, isn't it? But it's it does have bits of flashbacks and twists and reveals and things like that. And I just think it's, to say it will have been made on absolutely bugger all budget is just a brilliant little film.
I did a poll on Twitter. What is the best non-Batman Christopher Nolan movie? Because I thought it was a little bit unfair to include the Batman ones, but. Interstellar, weirdly enough, didn't get any love at all. The choice was between Interstellar, Inception, The Prestige, and Memento. Memento is 26.3%, 31.6% for Inception, and 42.1% for The Prestige. So The Prestige certainly seems like the favourite
Absolutely.
Rightly so. I think it's where Nolan's career had peaked at the time. And I think in terms of this sort of more stripped back, less kind of massive bombastic films that he's done since, I prefer the Prestige. I can sit and watch the Prestige rather than watch Interstellar or Inception.
It's my favourite film that he's done.
Yeah, I think it probably is mine. Yeah,
and I think I agree. I think he works best when he's a little bit dialed back. I think the fact that he's had some sort of like, he's had to colour in the lines, as it were, with this one, I think has helped make this, and just a really, really solid film. I like Dunkirk. I really enjoyed Dunkirk. What took me out of Dunkirk was the whole, we've got a guy's story that's taking 3 days, we've got a guy's story that's taking 3 hours, and we've got somebody's story taking 30 minutes. That took me out of it a little bit. That felt a bit too much.
Yeah, I mean, it was Nolan trying to do a war film in his style of non-linear cyclic storytelling, and it just sort of... I had this argument with my uncle a while back, because he's like massive into war films. He's got this thing where he doesn't like watching a film to be like an intellectual exercise. He wants us to be able to relax and not think about it. Which, with war films usually, and he hated Dunkirk because he said it was just too complicated for what it is. And it doesn't. I think it was a failed experiment. It doesn't fit the genre, because I'm not overly keen on it. I appreciate it as a Nolan movie, but it's not one that I was in a huge hurry to watch again. And since I saw it a second time, I'm not in a hurry to watch it a third time.
No, I have to say I've seen it twice, the cinema with you, and then on Blu-ray, and yeah, I'm not going to rush to watch it again. But I felt like I clearly enjoyed that one, whereas, like I say, maybe with Tenet, I just couldn't get away with it. Interstellar, I loved, and like I say, I know I've just said moments ago that it has its problems, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I do find that Nolan's a very personal, like his films are about small, tight knit stories. So the thing with Dunkirk, because the sort of the main underlying historical event was so massive, it just seemed like, I don't know, like it seemed odd to focus on just sort of single stories that happen between 5 or 6 people at a time.
I probably would have enjoyed Dunkirk a whole lot more. Like you say, I think if it had just followed one of those groups and been their story.
I think if it had been named differently, do you know what I mean? Because the name Dunkirk suggests that it's about the entire event.
Yeah,
but it's not about the entire event at all. It's about 3 different sort of small, tight knit stories within the entire event. It's set against the backdrop of Dunkirk rather than it being about Dunkirk.
Yeah, you certainly can't say that he's not a brave filmmaker.
Oh, not at all. I mean, it was an incredible experiment. I just don't think it worked.
No. I mean, Inception worked, didn't it? Inception was great.
Yeah. I mean, that was another one that was a very experimental film at the time.
That film's going to be 10, 12 years old now, and people are still talking about it and talking about the spinning top at the end, and it's parodied to. I think it's a really, really great bit of cinema is Inception, and the CGI, the music from Hans Zimmer, the acting from the cast, obviously DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, Elliot Page, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, so many fantastic talents in there. Michael Caine again. Yeah, I think that's a real strong film, is that. I loved Rises as well. Rises never gets any love, and I adore that film. I absolutely adore it.
I think I preferred The Dark Knight but I do love Rises. I think The Dark Knight for me is the best Batman movie ever made.
I don't know whether I just did it to death when it came out, but I would take Begins and Rises over The Dark Knight. And don't get me wrong, that is not me saying, people listening at home, that I don't like The Dark Knight. I adore The Dark Knight. It is fantastic. It's an 8.5, 9 out of 10 film. But I'm just saying, on a subjective level, enjoy, Begins and Rises a little bit more.
It's a bit like picking a favourite Star Wars movie, isn't it? It's just like...
It's got to be Attack of the Clones, surely.
yeah, definitely. I remember having this conversation with somebody in a pub a few years ago, and it was... he said to me, like, okay, so rank the original trilogy. So I was like, okay, so from worst to best, I'd definitely go Jedi, and then the first one, and it's did you not like Return of the Jedi? It's like, no, I'd love Return of the Jedi. Like, I love all of them. It's just if you have to rank something
has to come last, doesn't it?
Yeah, Empire's just my favorite. I think it's the same with the Dark Knight trilogy, because I love the Dark Knight. I love all three of them, but I think the Dark Knight Rises and Begins for me.
That they're your second and your third.
Is how I'd rank from best to worst, yeah.
Absolutely. Do you know, I'll be really interested to see what Christopher Nolan does next, because he is one of my favourite filmmakers, and the hype that me and you got when we had that Tenet was announced, and the countless conversations we've had debate, what do you think it's going to be about, and where do you think he's going to go? And I'm really interested to see what he does next. I hope we get something like The Prestige again. Not like a beat for beat, another magic film or whatever, but something like of that caliber would be fantastic for me. Because I really don't think he's beaten it.
Yeah, I'd like to see him strip things down a little bit, because I think something that's happened with Tenet is that I think Christopher Nolan is starting to become very aware that his films are going a little bit over the top, and that he's maybe peaked in terms of, big, powerful cinematography and big, expensive, big landscapes and stuff. I think, I'd like to see him strip things back a little bit and go back to your Prestige, your Memento, your Insomnia type of film.
Ones where the audience has to think, but not too much.
Yeah, just like less complicated, big noise, as well, because that's the thing with Nolan, is like his sound is such an important thing with him, and sometimes to his detriment. I think, like, if you watching some of his films at the cinema, I find can be quite jarring. Tenet was hard because it was loud, so loud.
Yeah, it was apparently mixed better in the cinema. I've obviously not watched the home media thing, but I've heard so many people say that the 4K and the DVD and the Blu-ray or even streaming it or whatever, that the sound is off, and for people to be able to follow what was going on, they've had to have the subtitles on.
Yeah, I've read that. I think that's what happens when you make a big bombastic movie, and then you mix, sort of Dolby Surround down to stereo 4K. Like it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, the idea normally with the 4K stuff is that you get like the Dolby Atmos tracks on it and stuff like that, and you get the whole surround sound thing. I would imagine that the sound quality, in theory, should be most compromised on the DVD because it's the lowest quality.
I think if you had access to surround sound, I think it will probably be fine. But then, because you're mixing 5 speakers worth of things into 2. It's a different type of stereo field, so it's. When you've got frequencies mixing together, sorry, this is talking shop a little bit. When you've got like frequencies mixing together, where they shouldn't, in places where they shouldn't be in a stereo mix, and across a stereo field, sorry, it's going to start causing conflict. Like it's going to, you're going to get things that don't match right, and I think that's something that maybe didn't think about.
Yeah, he had to redub. I know he swears blind that he didn't, but you listen to the trailers and the pre-released prologue of The Dark Knight Rises that went before Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and it's obvious that they've had to redub Bane, because when you listen to Bane on it now, he just sounds like he's, I don't know, a couple of clicks on the volume meter above the rest of the audio, doesn't he? Sort of like, you'd be everyone else is talking, and then it's, oh, you think the darkness is shining light. And it's like just way over the top.
That was the first thing I noticed when I went to see it at the cinema, and I think that's what put me off, because that's all I was thinking about all the way through. The first time I saw Dark Knight Rises
was too loud.
Was that the sound was wrong. It just didn't work, because it was too loud, and it was just a bit. It took me out of the film. Like, it took me out of the narrative a little bit.
Fair enough. I don't know what it is about that film, but I love it. Me and some mates, we stayed up all night. There wasn't a midnight showing of it, but there was a 4 a.m. showing of it, or something like a 4-5 a.m. showing of it at the IMAX Media Centre in Bradford. And so we stayed up all night. We got to my mate Andy's for about 10 o'clock at night. Ordered some pizzas and some curries in, and watched Begins, watched the Dark Knight, and then some like episodes of the animated series or whatever, and then drove on to Bradford in the middle of the night, queued up, and there were some absolute brilliant people dressed up sort of like with some homemade costumes and stuff like that, and it was going to a little bit of like a premiere sort of a thing, and it was like the first time I ever went and did one of these like midnight sort of, or sort of silly release time sort of showings, and absolutely was just sort of in awe of the film. Like, when I came out, we were all just like in shock and just didn't know what to think. And like, it's the first time I've ever gone home, had a kip, got up, got showered, and then gone back to the cinema again to see a film.
Yeah.
And I think I ended up seeing Dark Knight Rises 3 or 4 times in the cinema. I know I went with you once.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it twice. I saw it with some lads from uni, and I went with you. I might have seen it 3 times. I think that was the Dark Knight Rises was the first time I started doing that. Like going 3 or 4 times to see the same film in the cinema. And, I went to see all the Star Wars movies that have come out, in since I've seen them all twice at the cinema, at least.
I've only seen them all once. I was going to go and see Force Awakens again because I loved that movie, and then I just couldn't find the time between work and music and spending time with the missus and just life. And then before I knew it, it was out on Blu-ray. But
I enjoyed The Force Awakens. We'll have to do a Star Wars episode.
Absolutely. I think Rogue One's the strongest of the ones that have come out over the last decade or so.
Yeah. Should we do one that that everybody hates? Should we pick one that's we can defend?
Oh, don't make me watch Revenge of the Sith.
I was thinking Phantom Menace.
Oh. Okay, Phantom Menace. I'm game for you.
Because I'm a big fan of cheering the underdog. I like to defend films that everybody else thinks is shit.
I do like Phantom Menace, though. I tell you what, though, should we save that for in a few weeks' time? We're hopefully going to be allowed to come round to each other's houses again.
Yeah.
Should we make that a movie night?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, because we can watch we could watch the prequel trilogy, or we could pick a couple of Star Wars movies out to watch.
I tell you what, we should watch that'd be a really good companion piece with it. Have you ever seen the film Fanboys?
No.
Oh, well, it's a story it's set in the mid-90s, and it's quite miserable when you think about it, but it's about Star Wars Phantom Menace being announced, and this group of friends that have all grown up together wanting to go and see it, and then one of the friends is diagnosed with terminal cancer and knows that he won't make it to the release date. So they set off on this massive week-long road trip to break into Skywalker Ranch and watch and steal so they can watch a test pressing of the film. And it's the story of them doing that, and it's a comedy, but it sort of obviously has its downbeat moments, obviously because one of the lead characters is dying of cancer, but it's really really quite good for just sort of like an indie flick. But it's called Fanboys.
Okay, I'll give it.
I reckon it'd make quite a good companion piece to that.
Yeah, I like watching the Family Guy ones as a companion.
Yeah. They never did the prequels, though, did they?
No, they didn't. I think the Cleveland show is going to do those. Did Robot Chicken do them?
Robot Chicken have done all sorts of Star Wars stuff. I've never really watched much Robot Chicken, but don't they do little skits rather than like the full thing?
Yeah, it's kind of like small sketches with like stop motion action figures.
I remember they did a Scooby-Doo one, and it was brilliant because it was the Scooby-Doo guys investigating at Camp Crystal Lake, but they got they got a mixture of the proper voice actors and I think some of the people who played them in the film. So they had like a reasonably authentic sort of like mystery, solving voice cast sort of thing. And then them chasing after Jason Voorhees was hilarious.
Yeah.
We've descended off on a complete and utter tangent there.
We can do let's do a Star Wars episode at some point. But yeah,
I think we should.
That's our sort of Christopher Nolan.
A Christopher Nolan Scooby-Doo movie.
Yeah. I'm assuming this isn't going to be the first Christopher Nolan episode that we'll do because we're both big fans and and there's so many good movies in there that I think we should come back and talk about.
We just had a chat today, I think, and I think that's been. Hopefully, you guys at home have found that interesting. You'll have to tweet us and let us know because we've been possibly a little less structured this time around than perhaps. We have been previously. But I think if we come back to Nolan, like we were sort of saying while we were getting ready to record, we should maybe really sort of look into, like you say, the technical side of things and look at some of the stuff that the cinematographers do and like the screenwriting process and really delve into what makes a Nolan film besides Chris Nolan. I think that would be a good jumping off point for...
Definitely a good topic, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we've been rambling for an absolute age, my friend. Shall we do some questions?
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Shall we have a question jingle?
Question jingle. So Chris Garland said, is there a film that made you really appreciate filmmaking, as in all aspects of film, shots, dialogue, story, editing, etc.? I've always loved films, but I think for me it was when I watched Escape from Alcatraz with my dad as a kid, a classic that made me change the way I viewed films going forward. Was there a turning point that made you look at films differently? Yes, Memento. I think watching Memento. when I was about 17, I'd just written my first...
I drank a very good beer.
I'd just written and produced my first song because a mate of mine at school who now works for the company that did the visual effects for First Man, and they've won God knows how many Oscars. So shout out to Phil Johnson, very proud of you, mate, if you're listening to this, because you produced my first music video. He wanted to do a music video, and I went and stayed over at his house for a few days, and we did a video for this track. And by the end of the second day, we were burnt out. We were so tired. We've been just doing camera shots of a poker game all day.
Yeah.
From about 7 o'clock in the morning to almost midnight. But it's that thing where you're really tired, but you're wide awake, like you're physically exhausted, but you can't sleep. And he says, right, I'm going to put this film on, which is directed by the same guy that did Batman Begins. Because at the time, I think that was the only one that was out. It was around the time that The Prestige came out. And he said, if you fall asleep, that's fine. But I'm going to put it on anyway. As someone who's interested in the way that films work, because I'd sort of become interested in the way that films worked, because we'd been filming a music video, and I didn't really know anything about that at the time. And watching this guy working and watching the composition of camera shots and stuff like that, started to get a feel for what was going on, and I think had a different type of a newfound respect for filmmakers. And yeah, he put on Memento, and it was just the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. I was I remember him looking over to me at one point and saying, are you alright? Because you look like you're about to fall asleep. And I'm like, I'm so tired, but I just can't take my eyes off this.
You can't take your eyes off the film.
Yeah, so I think that to me was, it made me appreciate a different type of storytelling, particularly, but in terms of editing and non-linear storyboarding in a movie, and then adding on top of that sound design and camera shots, and because with us just filming a music video, I was looking out for that sort of stuff like I'd never had done before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think that was my introduction into Christopher Nolan, and it just blew me away. And I think that for me is the time that the turning point for me, where I started to look at films differently.
Fair enough. Well, mine's much simpler. I've got when I read Chris's question, because he messaged me on fairly late on last night, and I said to him, I said, I'm gonna have to think about that one, buddy. But I sort of stopped and thought, right, what moments mean, sort of, do I look back on from watching films, and do they mean a lot to me, sort of thing. And similar to Chris, watching films with my old man, a lot of my film taste is influenced from Dad. And I'm sure I've told the story before, maybe on here or on YouTube, but sister used to be a dancer, and Mum used to take her out to rehearsals, and quite often on a Saturday, me and Dad would be left to our own devices, and he'd often put on, films or whatever, and like I've said before, he'd show me all sorts of things I shouldn't be watching. But one afternoon, he put on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and I remember him saying, "Oh, you're going to love this," and me just not being in the mood to watch it at all. But within 5 minutes of the opening flashback scene in Utah, where he's, the train sequence and, the young Indy River Phoenix bit, I was hooked. And then it was just like, as I'd have probably been, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 at that point, I would have, maybe sort of been able to, I would have maybe only seen, like, Batman films and Scooby-Doo and, like, animated things and stuff like that. And this was one of the first films I ever saw, that I remember actually watching, like a proper film. And I just remember being absolutely sort of blown away by it. And then obviously the bonding experience with my old man, and that's very much become a film that means the world to me. Because of the father-son dynamic in it, obviously, and with my old man not being around anymore, that sort of really does, sort of speak volumes to me on so many levels. And then the other thing that I remember is some lads that I went to school with, same lads that I went to go and do the Dark Knight Rises trip with, some lads called Ross, Andy and Lyndon, and some of my oldest friends grew up together, and we used to every other Friday night go and, or rather we started sort of meeting up at my mate Andy's, because his parents work nights. And we basically had run of the house to ourselves, and he had this massive TV and, really huge, sort of like one of them L-shaped sofas that just fills a room. And we used to, the four of us would always go round, and then, occasionally other friends would come round as well. And after I'd been 16, 17 at the time, and wasn't really that well versed in the films that I'd seen. And we used to just watch all sorts. I remember one of the first nights we were there, we watched like one of the Scream movies, Jeepers Creepers, Casino,
right?
And
it's an interesting mix into that.
Now, yeah, but it was just literally what was on the shelf sort of thing. And in particular, I can't remember what the other film was that we watched, but Casino was the one that stood out. I
love Casino.
Because obviously of the films I just mentioned, then that is substantially by a long mile the best. Of the sort of films. I think it might have been Beverly Hills Cop or something like that, the other one. But
I love that movie.
Yeah, great movies. But we watched that, and I just remember watching Casino and thinking, wow. And that was one of the things that sort of sent me down the road of, I really need to broaden my film horizons. And when I then started working 18 months later or so, when we'd finished college, and I decided not to go on to university, that's really where my sort of collecting movies habit started, because I just wanted to watch everything. And it was, pre the days for you young listeners out there listening, where you could go onto the internet and watch anything you wanted on Netflix or
you had to buy the
Amazon or... You actually, Netflix existed, but you had to send off and wait a week for them to post you the DVD. And then usually when you received the DVD, the previous bastard that had rented it had used it for a coaster, so it was unwatchable anyway.
Remember DVDs?
I do, I've got a room full.
Remember Netflix before it was Netflix?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Casino's a good one because that's such an interesting film, and it's a really well made film, and it's beautifully shot, and it's like it is Scorsese, isn't it?
It is, it's Scorsese. Yeah, it was the follow up in the sense of it was the film they did next to Goodfellas. Yeah, but obviously it's got De Niro and Pesci in it, and then is it Sharon Stone, James Woods as well? A long time since I've seen it. Probably 4 or 5 years.
Goodfellas is a big favourite of mine, but I think Casino is more sort of... There's more clever camera stuff going on in Casino. Goodfellas, I think, focus more on the story, whereas Casino, I think by that point, Scorsese was starting to get a little bit more experimental with his camera work, and like...
Scorsese's a fantastic filmmaker.
He's an incredible director.
Time and time again about like The Departed is one of my favourite films. What absolutely brilliant film. He did Wolf of Wall Street, didn't he?
Yeah, the Wolf of Wall Street's a big favourite of mine.
That's obviously fantastic, isn't it? There's just so many great
Gorgeous
films
movie.
that guy's done. He's an absolute just heavyweight.
Have you seen The Irishman yet?
I haven't. No, I bought the Criterion because I'm not against streaming stuff at all. In fact, we use it quite a lot, but. Do you know, it's the collector in me, and you'll appreciate this, Phil, and maybe some other listeners will as well. You've got an actor or a director or whoever it might be, you've got a collection of films there on your shelf.
Yeah, there's something about
they're
having
all
them
in order.
Yeah.
And then there's one missing.
Yeah.
And it was infuriating. And then when Criterion, which is a boutique Blu-ray label for anybody that might not know, they take films and give them the real sort of like fancy special edition treatment sort of thing. Is an oversimplification, but is what they do. They got the rights to put it out on physical media, so I just thought, well, I'll wait until that comes out, and I'll watch it in its own, in my own time sort of thing. But I've yet to sit down and watch it. I was talking to our pal Ruben about it, our fellow band member, and. Yeah, I've still not managed to sit down and watch it, but it's like a 3.5 hour film. It
is a long film.
It's one of them where I'm not doing it in chunks. I'm committing a day to it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's a whole evening. Like
I'm looking forward to it though. So, Chris, hopefully, mate, that little bit of a natter answers your question. And thank you so much, mate, for listening, supporting us, and for your brilliant questions as always. Talking of brilliant questions and valued listeners, we move on to our next question from Will.
We've got a few questions from Will because he's been a legend again.
He has. What a champ, Will, mate.
Which is the best? Because we've talked about this before. Like, which is the best video game movie? And if you can make a game into a movie, which would it be? My favourite video game movie currently, actually, do you know, I really enjoy the Tomb Raider remake.
Yeah, I do and all. That's great.
Resident Evil series, obviously.
It is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah, more or less, but still.
But what was that about Resident Evil? Sorry,
I like the Resident Evil series. I love all of them.
I don't mind them at all, to be fair. I've not played the game, so I can't talk about how faithful they are to the source material or whatever, but I went with years ago, I think it was whichever one's set in the prison. I went with some mates to go and see that and right enjoyed it. It was one of the first Blu-rays I ever bought as well. But
I quite like the Tomb Raider, the sort of, I say original, I don't know how original it is, but the Lara Croft Tomb Raider movies, the Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft.
Yeah, well, they are called Lara Croft Tomb Raider, aren't they? So.
Yeah, I think I do prefer the Alicia Vikander one, but
I certainly did. I liked that.
For what they are, the Jolie one's just coming out of the 90s, like the.
Oh yeah, they are just like you say. They're just straight out of the 90s, stereotypical 90s action movie. That'd have been sort of at her sort of peak, wouldn't it?
2001, that one came out.
Yeah, so it'd have been right when she did Bone Collector and Taking Lives, and when I know she still gets cast in stuff now, but it was probably about the time where she was, like say, peak popularity sort of thing, wouldn't it? That sort of thing.
Yeah, before she was a director, certainly.
I mentioned it on an episode previous, Will, about a video game, but obviously we're getting Uncharted. That's one that I wanted, so I'm curious to see where that goes. My big one would be Broken Sword. It was an old PC game. I think one of them came out on the PlayStation, but primarily an old PC game. And it's kind of like what do you call it? What am I on about? Like an Indiana Jones treasure hunting, sort of solve the puzzle, national treasure-esque, sort of that kind of an adventure sort of thing. And you got the guy, George Stobart, who's he's basically just meant to be a bit of an everyman, and then his sort of fiance is an investigative journalist, and they sort of end up getting involved in these adventures where the bad guys have stolen the ancient artifact of whatever it is, or they're going to do whatever. And they're like, do you remember the type of games where you used to click and point, and you had to click on items on the screen, and you'd be in a room and you had to solve the puzzles and stuff like that, and they were that sort of games, and I absolutely adored them. But I think it would translate well to an action movie, maybe a series.
It's funny that because me and Ruben were talking about L.A. Noire, about the possibility of that being, because the thing is with L.A. Noire, it's kind of like the game's built on noir 50s cop movie cliches anyway. So it's kind of like that L.A. Noire's been to the cliche factory and come back again. Which I think would make for a really interesting movie, because it would be like the entire idea of noir, of a 50s noir cop dramas, all sort of rolled into one big giant, which I suppose is kind of if you look at the cop dramas as the same as the private detective dramas of that sort of noir cliche, I suppose that's basically what Edward Norton's just done with Motherless Brooklyn.
Yeah. I suppose it is in a way, isn't it? Yeah, I've not seen that yet. I've seen the trailers, mind you.
It is good, but it's just a noir movie. It's just a tribute to noir. It's
just
the same way that
a tip of the hat.
The same way that Unforgiven's a tribute to spaghetti westerns in a neo-western style. It's
Unforgiven's a brilliant Clint Eastwood movie.
It is that,
and this is coming from somebody who's not really a western fan. I do like the Clint Eastwood westerns. The Dollars trilogy is brilliant and stuff, but anyway, Will, to answer your first part of that question, my favourite video game movies at the moment, I really enjoyed the Sonic the Hedgehog that came out last year.
I was just going to say, did you see that? Because I haven't seen that yet.
It's brilliant. I really, really liked it, but I think my favourite's got to be Pokemon the first movie. Okay.
Yeah, I always forget Pokemon was a game before it was a TV show.
Yeah, so I would say the Pokemon anime. Let's have a look. So what was Will's next question? Was it a daft one?
Because there was what would you like to see turned into a game? Into a movie. And I'll finish with this one just because I have said it before, but I want to see them do Assassin's Creed properly.
Yeah. It needs to be done properly, because the Fassbender one's obviously no.
It's awful. Really, it's such a shame. It was a real waste of a good movie. But yeah, anyway, who would win in a fight, Mr. Rogers or Bob Ross?
Mr. Rogers.
Defend.
Exhibit A, the ultimate showdown of Ultimate Destiny.
All right.
So
you don't need a better.
I don't know if anybody remember. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that or not, folks, but that was probably about 15 years ago on the internet, and it was a flash animated music video with a really bad MIDI song about all sorts of celebrities and characters from pop culture battling each other in a big city brawl, and Mr. Rogers.
It was like Epic Rap Battles of History before it was Epic Rap Battles of History.
Yeah, it was. It was, what was it? Something like I can't remember the line, but the run up to it. But the last line of the song is, and the winner was Mr. Rogers in a bloodstained sweater. So if he can take on Batman and Godzilla, then he's having Bob Ross.
Yeah, it was always really daft ones, wasn't it? It was always Hitler versus Steven Seagal from the 90s or something.
But yeah, but that one's the collective rap where it's brilliant. I would recommend you go and hunt that down. Do you remember the website Newgrounds that used to have all the Flash games?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was on there. But yeah, that's my my argument. Didn't Bob Ross actually serve in the military though?
He was. Bob Ross was in the army.
Yeah. So did Mr. Rogers serve at all? Would he have been in the Would he have been maybe in the Second World War, given the sort of... 'cause he was an old man in the 70s and 80s.
Was
or
Mr.
an
Rogers
older
really
man.
in the military? The truth behind... Sorry, that's... He registered for the draft in 1948, but was never...
Never called upon.
Was he ever a Navy SEAL or a military sniper? What? Okay. I think this is a conspiracy theory.
I can just see, though, Mr. Rogers there, just sort of like sniper rifle, sort of just looking, through the crosshairs at his target, going, "It's not going to be a nice day in your neighbourhood."
See, this is kind of like... that's knackered my logic on it a little bit, because my thing... I'll give this a bit of thought, and my thing was that they're both really nice people for different reasons. I reckon Bob Ross is like... Bob Ross is in his own little safe world, right? And he's nice because he doesn't have to not be. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think Mr. Rogers, because I kind of like, I like to think of myself as quite a nice person, but I try and be a nice person because
he's not really, folks.
Yeah, well, you know me better than anybody. I try and be a nice person because mostly because horrible people really annoy me.
Yeah,
and I think Mr. Rogers has been through some shit. He's been through something nasty that's made him get really kind of develop this real hatred for horrible people, and the only way that you can combat it is by being nice, right? So I reckon.
So he's doing it because he's, like you say, because he's witnessed something and he doesn't ever want to put that on the world. So he's...
Yeah, I reckon Bob Ross is a nice person in his own little world, and I think in a fight, if you put him up against Mr. Rogers, I think he'd bottle it. I think Mr. Rogers would knock him out with one punch, and then get it.
Two poor sweet old men.
And then get him up off the ground. And Bob Ross is dead, isn't he?
They're both dead.
Are they both dead? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think Mr. Rogers would knock Bob Ross out in a single punch, and then would pick him up off the ground and apologise profusely to him. But I don't think he'd shy away from a fight, and I think Bob Ross would. So that's my logic on that.
Fair enough.
Which movie do you think is the scariest?
Okay. So for me, I've seen that many horror movies, and to be honest, Will, I love them, but they don't unnerve me. But I'm just sort of thinking of a few things that have stuck with me. So that the films might not necessarily be great, but I'm just going to quote a few scenes. So in Insidious 2, which is a film that came out 2013-ish, in Insidious 1, to set the background, the main ghost that's haunting the family is that of an old woman in a black dress with a veil over her face, and she's horrible looking. Is the thing, like the thing of nightmares, and quite creepy in the first film. But in the second film, we learn that it's actually not an old woman, but is the ghost of a man that was a serial killer that used to dress up as this old woman to kill people. And in a flashback in the second film, we see this guy putting on his outfit whilst there's a young girl tied up, screaming in terror because she realises what she's about to become a victim of. Whilst we see this guy sort of full lipstick on, crooked teeth, dress on but no wig, and he's doing the IMAX. It's giving me shivers thinking about it, because you're sort of seeing him become the monster. And that terrified me, did that scene. Otherwise, a reasonably poor film, but that scene terrified me. The Exorcist stands up. The Exorcist is a creepy film.
Supposedly one of the scariest films ever made, isn't it?
It's up there. And do you know, I'll be honest. I watched The Exorcist for the first time about 2 months ago. And it was one of them where there'd been a documentary on it on Netflix, not about the actual film, but about the supposed true story that inspired, is it Friedkin and William Peter Blatty, is it, to write and make the film. So Laura had watched that, and I watched it with her, and then we were like, should we watch The Exorcist? So we put The Exorcist on, and it was really unnerving, like really, ugh. at points. And I suppose that's the mark of a really, really great film, isn't it? Is when you can turn around and say that actually bits of it unnerved you. And then I suppose the last thing for me is, again, a fairly modern one. But The Conjuring 2 is quite a good one. It really does have its creepy moments, but what made it, again, more creepy for me was there's a scene in it where a little girl gets possessed by the spirit of an old man, and she's all sort of, oh, hello, la 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 la, and then all of a sudden, I'm a crusty old man, and she's got all that sort of thing going on. But the voice, and obviously with a film you just get somebody to dub it, but then what made it really scary is because the haunting that they based it on was the Enfield haunting, which is quite a famous British sort of haunting sort of thing. There's been loads of documentaries and films about it. And at the end of the Conjuring film, over the credits, they played the real footage of this girl's interview. And she's there talking merrily away as a little girl, and then all of a sudden this deep Cockney sort of voice comes out.
Yeah, that's quite frightening.
And it's like, there is no way anybody could be throwing their voice. There's no way it could be dubbed. This girl has been inhabited by the spirit of this old man. And it's absolutely terrifying. So there you go, mate. That would be my answers.
I'm not a big horror guy, but because I'm like, I don't like being scared. You know what I mean? I'm not one of those like. So my answers are probably going to end up being like, proper horror fans listen to this are going to be like, that's really tame or whatever. But the ones that have braved watching, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre scared the life out of me. And it wasn't jump scares or anything like that. It was just creepy and weird. Like when it's basically the stuff that the Wrong Turn films were sort of trying to replicate, of that evil hillbilly sort of deformed inbred thing. And when they go back and the granddad's sitting at the dinner table and he's clearly been dead for months, but they're still feeding him, and it's horrifying. There was that a lot of the found footage kind of CCTV ghosty horrors that like the thing, because it's really easy to do it, but stuff like Paranormal Activity that really does frighten me, because the jump scares are beautifully done a lot of the time.
The first one's great, and the third one's not too bad. My favourite Paranormal Activity was one of the spin-offs that they did, and it was called The Marked Ones. And I went into it fully expecting it to be utter tosh, and actually a very, very reasonable film.
The thing that really frightened me, and it's just one of those things that, like, when you get a jump scare, but it's just timed perfectly, and it's like blood-curdlingly terrifying. I can't remember which one it's in. It's in one of the Paranormal Activity movies, and she's sitting in the kitchen on the floor screaming at the ghost to leave her alone. And then she stops and just has a little meltdown. And then it waits a couple of seconds, and then all the drawers and cupboards fly open at the same time. And the kitchen just sort of...
sneezes.
The kitchen sort of sneezes and everything goes... Poof. And that scared the shit out of me.
I think that's the second one.
Is it? Yeah. That scared the shit out of me.
I think that's the second one.
Because the second one, it's a rich family, isn't it? And they're in a house with a swimming pool and stuff.
Yeah, so the first three are all the same family, and it's the ghost haunting, it haunts one sister and her husband in the first one, then it's the second sister and her family in the next one, and then the third one's like a prequel, and then from there it sort of goes off a bit, but...
Yeah, I think the other one that really scared me was Mama.
I hated that,
Yeah, like, it wasn't... The story was crap, and it wasn't a good film, but it was just... It's the little tricks, like removing single frames from the footage to make it jumpy,
make the performance jittery and stuff.
Yeah, they've got a I can't remember the name of the guy that played her, but he does this a lot. He's got Marfan syndrome. He's like 6'8", and he's
really tall and sort of quite
really
lanky,
long limbs and big fingers and stuff. I'm allowed to say that because I've got Marfan syndrome, so that's fine. But like I'm 6'2" and I've got hands like shovels, but this guy's like huge.
He does.
And he's got like even just the test footage scared the life out of me, because it was where they'd done the thing with the strobe lighting, and they'd taken single frames out to make it like jittery and jumpy and weird, and this guy's doing all this contortionist stuff, which he's actually doing. That's practical effects. Like that's.
Do you know what it was about that film? It did reasonably creep me out. And I try not to do this with horror films, because you just have to go in and accept them for what they are. But me and my cousin, my granddad won tickets for it, and me and our Jess went to go and watch it in the cinema. And we both came out of it and went, right, okay, so at the end of the film, Mama takes one of the children and jumps off the cliff with her. So obviously the ghost's already a ghost, so that's fine, but the kid's going to splat on the beach below and be soup. Like, so how on earth do they explain that to the police afterwards?
Well, presumably they don't, and they get charged with throwing a child off a cliff.
Exactly, and that just completely just like took me out of it. And how stupid's that? But yeah, I remember the tagline of the film for that was something. It was something like one of those short sentence horror stories, wasn't it? You can look under the bed, look in the cupboards, look behind you. Just don't look up. She doesn't like to be seen.
Yeah, so that's
something like that, wasn't it? The tagline for that.
Yeah, that's so like proper horror fans are probably going to be listening to this and thinking, oh, but like, what a wuss.
I mean, we're not horror buffs. I mean, I love horror movies, but I don't consider myself a horror buff. I'm not.
No,
I mean, I turned off the original Last House on the Left, the Wes Craven one, because I really don't want to take us down a really dark hole. But there's a sexual assault in it, and it's graphic, and it's one of the only films I've ever turned off.
Yeah, I do struggle with that,
just not gone back to it. So stuff like that where it feels real. That scares me. But ghosts and sort of goblins and zombies and all that sort of stuff, I get a thrill from it, but I wouldn't say I'm scared by it. But unless it's done really, really well. But there you go, mate. Hopefully that answers your question. You never know, mate. We might have to do a horror special.
Yeah, maybe
at some point. Maybe pick something to scare the absolute life out of you, and
make you laugh.
Be interesting.
Probably. So with the last one we've got is Ruben's big question.
Should we have a big question jingle?
Let's have a big question jingle. Ruben's big question jingle. So Ruben says, if they were to go all the way back to Dr. No, who's your Bond and who's your Dr. No? And I did clarify this with him. He does mean as in a remake.
As in a remake. Well, Ruben, I think in early October of 2021, sir, you are going to get your wish, because I think that No Time to Die is going to try and do the old Spectre-style switcheroo, and Rami Malek's character is going to be some sort of Dr. No.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably going to happen.
I honestly don't know how to cast this one, to be right honest. Here we are talking about Bond again. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I really like Daniel Craig. If they were going to remake it, keep Daniel Craig. I think he's a great Bond. I don't know who I'd cast as Dr. No, because last time, obviously it's 60 years ago now, but obviously political correctness wasn't what it was. And if I'm remembering it rightly, Joseph Wiseman was not an Asian man or of Asian descent. And I think it was makeup that made him sort of appear like he had that heritage. So obviously we couldn't do that. And I'm ashamed to say I'm not really too au fait with my Asian actors. I haven't seen much Asian cinema. So I couldn't really think of anybody that I could say, oh yeah, that guy would knock it out of the park. And since the character is meant to be, mixed race Chinese German, I couldn't really cast Dr. No, to be right honest, but I do think that No Time to Die is going to invoke parts of it. I don't know. I get that vibe from it. I hope they don't. I'm praying that they don't, but I get that feeling.
I think because it depends whether they wanted to go sort of young or old with him. I would like to see Tom Hiddleston in that one because, as I was saying about the, when we did the Bond special about doing something more sort of noir.
Keeping it period sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I would quite like to see John Cho from Star Trek.
Okay.
He can do scary quite well, and he can do angry quite well. But he sort of seems like he could do the calm psychopath thing, because that like Dr. No is that, is that sort of calm, sort of like terrifying psycho. Yeah, I would like to see John Cho. I've got that.
Fair enough.
John Cho versus Tom Hiddleston.
It could be interesting. It might be one for if we do another Bond special next season to maybe come back to on that one, mate. To be right honest, but yeah, like I said, I think we're going to get that with No Time to Die.
I reckon it's likely. So. Yeah, that's all the questions. That's it from us. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. We haven't really discussed what we're going to do for the next one, because we've had a little break with this one. We had a week off. So
we did.
We'll have a word about it and we'll get back to you. Keep an eye on our social medias and all that. If you've got any questions or any feedback, give us a shout on Twitter at Own Museum Pod, Instagram at Own Museum Pod, or you can email us at Lost in His Own Museum Podcast at gmail.com. And we have a website now.
We do.
lostinhisOwnmuseum.weebly.com. So you can find us on that.
Absolutely, you can indeed, and I think we're hoping as hopefully this continues on, we're going to get to episode 10, which from mine and Phil's calculation should take us to sort of the beginning of May. We're then maybe going to take a month, 6 weeks respite, and really plan out season 2 for you. But we're going to hope to expand the format of the show, and you guys are going to be instrumental in that. We would love your feedback. What works? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? Start sending us suggestions for films. At the moment, we're picking films out of our own catalogues of films that we have on the respective movie shelves or on Netflix or whatever. But if you want to see us talk about something, send some requests in. We can get some polls going, and it's about making the show for you guys. So what works for you guys, you let us know, and that's really going to help us shape season 2. But thank you so much for listening and for all your continued support.
Yeah, contact us on Twitter, #Michael Caine was right. So yeah, that's it from us. Remain indoors, have a pleasant apocalypse, and we'll see you next time.